Robert Steele. I'm a former spy. I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Command. Strat 4 is a fake. Strat 4 is basically a marketing gimmick. I absolutely do believe that Orlando is a false flag attack. There are basically two kinds of false flag. In one kind of false flag, many people die, and the shooter dies. And that is ordered by a very, very narrow, small group of people, and all of the first responders who are dealing with the bodies are unwitting. They don't know that it's a false flag. The other kind of false flag, which has been very popular in the United States recently, has been a false flag in which actors are used. And if you look at Orlando, you'll notice that there are actually no pictures of bodies. There is absolutely no evidence that 50 people have in fact died. And Paul Craig Roberts, an Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Ronald Reagan, has just put out a very important call: show us the bodies. I have no direct knowledge about the bombings in Turkey, but I do believe that the bombings in Europe were created by a mixture of the Israeli Mossad and neo-Nazi French police and the Gladio stay-behind operation, which still has arms caches and still has many motives for striking fear into people's hearts. ISIS was created by Saudi Arabia and the Central Intelligence Agency. ISIS is a direct creature from the American invasion of Iraq and the Israeli desire to destabilize the Middle East. ISIS is not real. ISIS is theater. In the U.S. government, there are many factions, and we have what is called the deep state, which is factions within departments. For example, the CIA, there are 7 CIAs, not 1 CIA. There are people who have been self-selected and promoted by their predecessors who comprise a government that is in the shadows, and it outlives presidents. These people are capable of doing things that are very evil, including bombings and kidnappings and other things like that, and are not actually approved by the White House or by Congress. We are right now out of control. General Wesley Clark has appeared on YouTube and said we've had a foreign policy coup in the United States. Now, I will tell you that decisions in the United States are not made on the basis of evidence. Our intelligence community is a complete failure. It exists merely to spend money. Most decisions in the United States are bought and paid for. They are bought and paid for by the City of London with the Rothschilds, the Wall Street representatives of the Rothschilds, and in some cases, countries. For example, Hillary Clinton had a private server so that she could conceal from the government the fact that she was selling foreign policy decisions to Saudi Arabia and Israel. That was the whole point of the private server. The classified material that was on her private server was a sideshow. The real reason she had a private server was to conceal the fact that she was selling U.S. policy and U.S. interventions in the Middle East to Israel and Saudi Arabia. In my view, the single biggest threat to the Muslim world is Saudi Arabian Wahhabism. And Saudi Arabian money, which is being used to bribe everybody from the Malaysian Prime Minister on down to Nigeria. Muslims are not a threat. However, the perception of Muslims as a threat is being fed in part by the FBI using informants and creating false flag terror. There's an excellent book called The Terror Factory, which documents that 175 so-called terrorists, many of them Muslims, were in fact U.S. FBI informants who were entrapped and used to foster this climate of fear. Let me begin by saying that one of the greatest mistakes the West ever made was its betrayal of the Arabs after World War II. The British and the French betrayed the Arabs. They divided up Arabia, and much of what is happening today is a direct result of colonialism compounded by the American elective invasion of Iraq, for which there was absolutely no reason to go into Iraq. In the case of Libya, you have the French destabilizing Libya, and Hillary Clinton agreed to that in part because the U.S. was able to steal Libya's gold as part of the deal. Israel has always had a plan to destabilize and balkanize the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is paying to destabilize Syria because it wants an oil pipeline. And in fact, recent attacks against so-called Al-Qaeda and ISIS forces have actually been a pretext to take over territory intended to hold that pipeline. I cannot overemphasize the fact that Israel is not the only destabilizing agent in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is every bit as much to blame. I absolutely believe that the artificial boundaries that the West imposed around the world, but particularly in Africa, are long overdue for being destroyed. Certainly sells its services to CIA and other people, but you got to understand, CIA is stupid. CIA is using drones to kill people and only succeeding in 2% of the cases. The other 98% of the people that CIA kills are innocent men, women, and children. CIA is no longer capable of collecting human intelligence in the Middle East. CIA no longer has serious, deep analysts. They have a bunch of children that are hired because they're cheap. So I would say to you, as someone who's written 8 books on intelligence reform and someone who is the pioneer for the future of intelligence, I believe that we need multinational intelligence centers that rely primarily on open source information in all languages. And I would love to see Turkey create a regional intelligence center in which it can use all sources in all languages from all countries to confront the Western lies about the Middle East.